All right, today I want to talk about the Tablet of Shamash. This is a historical artifact found in Iraq, present-day Iraq, 1881. It was believed to be produced 860 BC as a cylinder seal that was sort of pressed into clay. And then you see you have the cuneiform inscription on that piece of clay to sort of, is the inscription to describe this tablet. But when the actual cylinder seal that was used to press this into clay, how old that is a mystery. If you listen to Trey Smith at God in a Nutshell, he's got a Genesis series where he talks about this tablet a little bit and associates it with the garments that Ham stole from Noah. And I really kind of align with that thinking that this could be a artifact that came over pre-flood with Noah with Ham. A lot of people like to eat from that tree of the knowledge and good and evil, especially today. It's just people gorge themselves on this kind of stuff of associating, what is good and what is evil. And we associate Noah as being good because he built the ark that saved humanity. But we failed to see any of his downfalls, right? So, preaching for 120 years, but only getting 8 people on the ark, you could see that as maybe a failure. Post flood, you've got 3 sons to help establish and recreate humanity with, and you can't find peace with one of them, and you end up disowning and banishing one of them, right? So probably not the best preacher or father, great ark builder, great winemaker. So, but we were very quick to see all of the great in Noah and regard him as a hero. And then same thing with Ham. You're very quick to see any of the negative aspects of Ham, and you're going to demonize him. You're not going to see any of the sort of drive that he had to try to elevate society. And elevating society is things that we want. We don't want our lives just to be survival. We want to be able to find ways that we can work together in society and enhance our lives working together, so that our lives aren't just about picking and scratching through life and providing our own security. We want to be able to rely on each other. But of course, it makes us vulnerable to taking advantage of each other. So it's a balance that has to be struck, and you can't demonize Ham or even when you get to Abraham and Nimrod. You can't demonize Nimrod so much for trying to build the city and elevating society. You can look at his ambition and find flaws in that, but just as you had with Pharaoh and Joseph, to beat the famine, they had to work together. You had to take the structure that Pharaoh was bringing forward, and then you had to take the interpretation from Joseph to work together to find a way to beat the famine. And of course, they rise to prominence. Everybody comes to that area because they had together had figured a way structurally to change the direction of the Nile, right? To dam up the water, create the aqueduct, and then they created the facilities to store the grain where everybody in that region, or maybe further, right, that flocked to Egypt and made Egypt this great power and beat the famine. It's this great human achievement, but then at the same time, that relationship between Pharaoh and the people and Caesar and the people, it always happens that the person at the top and the people below, that relationship deteriorates. The people in the system start to think that they stop seeing it as servitude and start seeing it as slavery, and then they revolt. And then the same thing happens with the Pharaoh, right? The Pharaoh loses sight of taking care of the people, and that whole relationship falls apart. And so the truth comes in. Pharaoh, Egypt falls apart. All the riches go to the people. They end up dispersed out in the wilderness because they didn't take, they took for granted all of the benefits that they had working with each other in society. right? They're immediately out there lost, complaining about, the garlic and the fish and the cucumbers and all these things that they had working together. They don't have that anymore. So that's what a lot of this, as I see it, the biblical story is about, trying to balance these two things, and being able to work together and maintaining that the relationship between the structure that we have, and then understanding the big picture too, because it's hard to balance the big picture of authority with the social structure that you're putting together, so to speak. But anyway, we've got this tablet right here that I think may have come over with Noah across the flood. But there's a lot of people that will interpret what they think this means. Like when you go up to Trey Smith, or even with this inscription here, because we're going off of whoever inscribed this cuneiform on here to say that this is Sin, this is Shamash, which would be the sun in Hebrew, right? And then Ishtar. And so this sort of ends up being the moon, I guess, and then these are the sun and something else going on. Who knows what's, I don't fully understand what that means, but how I see this is an eclipse. This is sort of that alignment, anti-alignment imbalance or whatever that's happening between the sun and the moon as we understand it. And then you have the sun and the moon as part of this the Lord that's happening here. And I see this as sort of like we saw with that Cartesian coordinate system of the x-axis and the y-axis. Just as we see right here in the disk right here. We have a y-axis, we have an x-axis. We understand this through magnetism. You can't think of it as magnetism, right? Because we're going to see a magnet, and we're going to see the flux of the magnet, and we're going to better understand this relationship that's happening on either side of the coin. Okay, so if you were to take a magnet, put it on a ferrocell, and you're going to see how you're going to get these sort of field lines, right? Because the magnet, the disparity of the imbalance between the north-south side of the magnet is strong enough that that flux of that is going to influence the nanoparticles of iron in that oil between the two panes of glass so much that it's going to influence it, and you're going to actually see the field lines in the ferrocell, right? You're gonna see how it influences the iron there. But if you were to take that magnet and you were to strengthen it, what would happen is that flux, that area of space, is going to shrink, right? So that area that you're going to see, that image that you're going to get, is going to shrink as the magnet gets stronger. If you were to weaken the magnet, that area is going to increase larger and larger, to the point that it's so weak that it can't influence the iron in that cell. It's not that it isn't there, it's just so weak, it's so subtle that it's not going to be able to influence those nanoparticles of iron. But you have to understand that all matter, just like Tesla said, is going to be these two inverse vortices where you're going to have that balance, right, of the dielectric. You're going to think of as compressive, right, coming together like gravity, and that force has to create the space from it. If you were to think of a large sphere of clay, so to speak, a medium density material, right, and you're just going to occupy this sphere of space with it, and then you were going to take some of that clay and make it very much more dense. And you're going to take some of that clay and make it much more less dense, right? Lighter, right? And you would create a sort of stratified layers, right? You're going to have the densest layers coming in, and that's going to create the space that it's going to leave, right? You're going to create more and more space of the lighter, for the lighter elements, than you would have for the heavy elements. And you're going to get this sort of stratified effect. And then, of course, we're told that it's happening on the plane of light as it is happening on the plane of matter. So on the plane of light, that's separating the potential for night from day, that would be the counter space of the light plane, right? The counter space in the space. And then you have the counter space in the space of the material plane. And so what that would happen, essentially what you would get is a void space here, a counter space of counter space, or a void, whatever you want to call it, a black hole or something, or whatever. It's going to be this void space in the middle, this rest point, that you would be seeing right, the dielectric overlay through this aperture, you'd be able to see that moon coming up, right, through the aperture. And then you would be getting that positive sun produced. So sun and the moon, and then sort of that neutral space of night that you would be able to get to see all the other things, the stars and everything else. So yeah, I would strongly urge people to look at this tablet and think of like maybe what it's talking about there, but to get to some of these other elements. And what I'll do is I'll just slowly go through the rest of this presentation so that you can read all of the inscription from the cuneiform that they have here. They got the 6 columns and then all these different pieces, and then you can pause it and kind of see what they're talking about. I think a lot of the language aligns with sort of what you're going to see in biblical text too, right? So you're thinking that the people that are inscribing this are probably influenced by those texts, right? And Shamash and Humesh, right? Shamash being meaning the sun, Humesh being the 5. You know, there's kind of some similarity there too. But at any rate, the Great Shamash, you're going to have the headdress with this spiral wave form. We're thinking energy. We're thinking of that Ferrel cell, right? We're thinking of sort of the waves, right? Why we get the tidal waves of the ocean would be that, just like you see in the Ferrel cell, right? There's going to be condensed, right, waveform lines that are happening that are creating that subtle thing, but you know, large scale. It's going to be significant, right? Just like seeing the entire plane of Earth, right, in one little spot. You can imagine how the dielectric salty seas are going to be brighter than maybe the what do you call it, the masses of the continents, right? And you can understand how you would start to see the map in the moon from this light. But you have the Great Shamash here. Look at his right hand. Okay, you got the rod of dew with the space. Okay, so this is counter space and space being created. The right hand, think of how you have hair on one side of your hand and it's kind of bald on the other. So you've got hair resembling the light on one side and the other side absence of light. So think of it that way. And then the crossing of the hands would be creating your quadrants. But think of how his left hand is on the beard. The beard is of the light. Think of these 3 figures right here. Think of matter itself. You have solid matter that's fixed, grounded to the altar. Next to him is going to be this other figure, right? Solid garment, solid garment. This guy's short and stout. This guy's a little taller, right? A little taller and leaner, lighter, you think? So lighter matter, but it's fluid matter that's half grounded, half thrown up into the open firmament above, the light, right? So gaseous matter and light matter that's more fluid. And then there's this other aspect of matter right here that's of the energy, right? It's of the Shamash. It's of this other kind of light, this metaphysical light, right, that we understand that we're going to see in all matter. We're going to see this sort of, this cross as you would see in a Ferrel cell of all matter exhibiting this light, right? And then we see that with the Earth right here, the Earth plane, 4 phases of the moon, right, that are going to be embedded in the Earth. So this part of the Ishtar, the moon, is going to be embedded with the Earth. You're going to have the Shamash here that would be the sun, the nodal sun that's going to be produced. It's going to be sort of that dominates the waters above, or how we see things. So I'll take you slowly through these next, 9 slides so that you'll see, but a lot contained in here, a lot of interesting things. And like I said, you don't have to swallow wholeheartedly what they're talking about in these scriptures. It's good perspective, just like everybody today has perspectives on their takes on things. This is their take on how they're seeing this. Doesn't mean that it's absolute truth. But thanks for watching. I'll proceed slowly through these slides and hope to see you on the next one.